Tuesday, 10 a.m. A nondescript truck pulls up behind a Zara store on London's Regent Street. Inside are 2,000 garments that didn't exist as a design just 14 days ago. By noon, half of them will be on the racks. By next Friday, the ones that haven't sold will be gone, permanently, never to return. Most people walk through those glass doors thinking they're entering a clothing store. They couldn't be more wrong. You're not walking into a boutique. You're walking into a $100 billion data processing plant that just happens to sell fabric. No, really, that's not an exaggeration. Amancio Ortega, a man who has never given a formal interview in his life, didn't build his empire on hemlines or seasonal trends. He built it on a brutal, mathematical exploitation of human anxiety. He turned logistics into a psychological trap that forces you to buy not because you want to, but because you're terrified of losing out. And stay with me, because near the end of this episode, I'm going to tell you about a desert in South America that you will never be able to unhear about, a place that quietly absorbs the leftovers of everything we're about to talk about. Today, we're deconstructing the invisible machinery of the fastest brand on Earth, from the 11-day rule to the algorithms that are now hunting it down even faster than it once hunted everyone else. This is the autopsy of a system we all fell for. This is Zara. Let's start with something that should feel strange the moment you actually think about it. Walk down Fifth Avenue in New York, or the Champs-Élysées in Paris, or Via Monte Napoleone in Milan. You'll see Gucci, you'll see Prada, you'll see Louis Vuitton. And right next to them, sometimes literally sharing a wall, you'll see Zara. One brand sells a t-shirt for $15. The brand standing right beside it sells one for $500. These two stores are not selling to the same customer, not made in the same factories, not aimed at the same income bracket on paper. So why are they standing on the exact same street? The answer isn't fashion. It's real estate psychology. Zara pays full luxury district rent on purpose because Ortega understood something most retailers never grasped. The store itself is the advertisement. For most of its history, Zara spent almost nothing on traditional marketing. No major TV campaigns, barely any celebrity endorsements, while competitors like H&M were spending hundreds of millions of dollars a year on advertising. Instead, the building does the talking. If you're standing where Chanel stands, your brain quietly assumes you belong there too. This is the first trick, and I use that word carefully, because nothing here is illegal. It's psychological architecture. You're not just buying a shirt. You're buying 5 seconds of feeling like you're shopping on the same street as a millionaire. 5 seconds. That's the entire product, packaged inside a t-shirt. And here's a small detail most people never notice. Zara's flagship stores are often deliberately oversized for the amount of stock they actually carry. Wide aisles, high ceilings, dramatic lighting that costs a fortune to install and run. It feels like a gallery, not a discount retailer. That's not an accident either. Keep that in mind, because everything else we talk about today builds on this same idea. Zara doesn't sell clothes. It sells feelings, timed down to the minute. To understand the machine, you have to understand the man who built it, and he is genuinely one of the strangest billionaires alive today. Amancio Ortega grew up poor in northern Spain, in a region called Galicia, the son of a railway worker. He left school at the age of 14 and started working as a delivery boy for a local shirt maker. Every single day, he watched how slow and wasteful the clothing industry was. Designers guessed what people might want 8 months in advance. Factories produced enormous batches, based on those guesses. And by the time the clothes actually reached a shop, the trend had often already changed, leaving warehouses stuffed with unsold stock. Ortega became obsessed with one single idea. Inventory sitting in a warehouse is dead money. Every day a garment sits unsold, it's quietly losing value. In 1975, he opened his first store in A Coruña, originally intended to be called Zorba, after the film Zorba the Greek. But there was already a bar nearby using that name. So at the very last minute, with the metal letters for the shop sign already cast, Ortega simply rearranged the letters he had into something close enough. Zara, one of the biggest retail empires in human history, exists, in part, because of a naming conflict with a small Spanish bar. Over the following decades, he built something the fashion industry had genuinely never seen before. A system where the time between an idea, sketched on paper, and that same item hanging in a shop window wasn't 6 to 9 months like the rest of the industry. It was roughly 2 weeks. And here's a detail that should genuinely surprise you. Even today, as one of the richest people on the planet, with a net worth that has at various points crossed $80 billion, putting him ahead of names like Warren Buffett at times, Ortega reportedly still eats lunch in the staff canteen, alongside regular employees. No private dining room, no entourage trailing behind him. For decades, he refused all interviews and avoided cameras so completely that journalists struggled to even get a current photograph of him. And there are stories of reporters waiting outside Inditex headquarters for days just hoping to catch a single, usable photo. This is not the playbook of a typical fashion mogul chasing red carpets and magazine covers. This is an engineer who happened to end up in the clothing business, and that engineering mindset is exactly what created the monster the world now calls fast fashion. But understanding the man only gets you halfway. The real secret isn't in his personality at all. It's in a building you've probably never heard of, and what happens inside it every 48 hours, which is exactly where we're going next. Here's where it gets almost military in its precision. In Arteixo, in Galicia, Spain, Ortega's home region, there is a single distribution building, roughly the size of 90 football fields. This is the physical heart of the entire empire. From this one location, trucks leave roughly every 48 hours, loaded according to one unbreakable rule: a truck must never, ever return empty. Every single trip is calculated down to the route, the timing, the exact volume of garments inside it. Zara borrowed its core philosophy directly from Toyota's car manufacturing system, the famous just-in-time method. Instead of producing huge quantities in advance and hoping they sell, Zara produces small batches first, watches in real time what actually sells in actual stores, and then rapidly scales up only the winners. Store managers around the world send sales data back to headquarters twice a day, every single day, using handheld devices. And that data isn't just numbers. Designers in Spain are reportedly known to study which exact items get tried on but not bought, which colors get picked up and put back down, almost like reading a customer's mind through their hesitation. If a particular cut of jeans sells out in Madrid by Wednesday afternoon, that sales data flows back to headquarters almost instantly, and a new batch can be designed, approved, and shipped within roughly 2 weeks, sometimes faster. And then there's a detail that sounds almost insane from a pure cost perspective. Zara has frequently used air freight, actual cargo planes, to move brand new collections to stores in places like Tokyo or New York within a single day. Most clothing brands would never do this because air freight is expensive and eats directly into profit margins. But Ortega understood something deeper than spreadsheets. Speed itself is the marketing budget. If new stock can hit a Tokyo store within 24 hours of approval, Zara doesn't need a billboard. The empty shelf that quietly fills up again tomorrow does the advertising for them. Roughly 60% of Zara's production still happens in Spain, Portugal, Morocco, and Turkey, relatively close to its European stores. Specifically so, this speed remains physically possible. Most competitors moved almost all production to Southeast Asia decades ago, purely to save on labor costs. Zara deliberately kept a huge chunk of production closer to home, paying noticeably more per garment, in exchange for the one resource money usually can't buy in this industry: time. Now, this entire machine sounds impressive on paper, almost admirable even, a triumph of logistics. But machines built to move this fast need fuel, and the fuel here isn't fabric or diesel. It's something far more personal. It's you checking your phone, wondering if that jacket is still there. And that's exactly the part of the system nobody designs on purpose to talk about out loud. Now here's where the psychology becomes almost uncomfortable to sit with. Ask yourself honestly, how often do you walk into a typical clothing store in any given year? Industry research on retail shopping habits suggests the average shopper visits a normal clothing brand somewhere around 3 to 4 times a year, maybe 5 if they're particularly into fashion. The average Zara customer. Some retail studies have placed that number as high as 17 visits per year. 17. That's not a shopping habit anymore. That's closer to a routine, almost like checking your phone first thing in the morning. Why would anyone visit a clothing store that often? Because Zara trained them to, and the training method is brutally simple: scarcity. A traditional store runs 1 or 2 big sales a year, usually January and summer. Zara almost never does this in the same way. New small batches of clothing arrive constantly, often twice a week in many stores, and crucially, they don't restock the exact same item. If you see a jacket you like on a Tuesday and you don't buy it, there's a very real chance it will never appear in that exact store again. Not next week, not ever. It might already be selling out in a completely different city while you're still standing there, deciding. This creates a psychological state that marketers actually have a name for: FOMO, the fear of missing out. Except here, it's engineered deliberately at industrial scale rather than faked with a countdown timer on a website. Zara doesn't even need to run loud limited edition, only 3 left campaigns. It doesn't need to, because the scarcity is structurally true, built directly into the supply chain itself, and structural scarcity feels far more urgent and far more believable to your brain than any fake pop-up notification ever could. There's also a quieter trick happening inside the store layout itself. Zara famously avoids putting price tags in huge, obvious displays the way discount retailers do. The clothes are presented almost like art pieces on minimal racks, deliberately spaced apart, so your brain processes the experience the way it would in a high-end boutique rather than a budget chain, even while the prices stay relatively low. You're getting a premium psychological experience attached to a mid-range price tag, and that mismatch is exactly what keeps people coming back. So you start checking more often, not because anyone told you to, but because you've personally learned, through repeated experience, that waiting always has a cost. That's not an accident. That's a designed behavioral loop, engineered right into the bones of the company. But here's the twist: nobody at Zara headquarters saw coming fast enough. While they spent 40 years perfecting the art of 2-week speed, somewhere in China, a much younger company was quietly building something designed to make even Zara look slow. For roughly 3 decades, Zara essentially owned this entire game. It was the fastest. Nobody on earth could match that speed. Then suddenly, a competitor showed up that doesn't even play by the same rules. Shein. If Zara is fast, Shein is instant. Zara takes roughly 2 weeks from design to shelf. Shein, according to multiple industry analyses, can reportedly take a product from concept to a live listing on its app in a matter of days, sometimes under a week, using AI-driven trend detection systems that scan social media platforms in real time and predict what will sell before a human designer even finishes a sketch. Some reports suggest Shein adds several thousand new product listings to its app every single day. Let that number sink in for a second. Several thousand brand new items every day, more new designs in a week than many traditional retailers produce in an entire year. And here's the structural difference that changes everything underneath the surface. Zara still operates thousands of physical stores around the world, real buildings, real luxury district rent, real staff, real overhead costs. Shein has almost none of that. No flagship store on Fifth Avenue, no premium real estate sitting next to Gucci, just warehouses and an app on your phone. That difference in overhead is exactly what allows Shein to list a volume of new designs every single day that a store-based model like Zara's simply cannot physically match, because real clothes still have to be shipped, unpacked, steamed, and hung on a rack by an actual human being in an actual building. Shein also tests products in micro-batches as small as a few hundred units, and if something doesn't sell within days, the data is simply discarded and the algorithm moves on. No human committee meeting required. No seasonal planning calendar, just constant automated trial and error running 24 hours a day. So the uncomfortable question facing the empire Ortega built is this: did Zara just quietly become the old world? The company that once terrified the entire global fashion industry by moving impossibly fast, is it now the slow, traditional player being terrified by something even faster than itself? Zara's current strategy seems to be leaning harder into the one thing Shein simply doesn't have: the physical experience, the prestige location, the feeling of an actual store you can walk into and touch the fabric. Whether that's enough to defend against a competitor with no rent, no physical stores, and an AI engine guessing your next obsession before you even know it yourself, that remains one of the most genuinely open questions in retail right now. And whatever the outcome of that fight turns out to be, there's one place on Earth that already shows you, in physical, undeniable form, exactly what this entire industry's speed actually costs. But speed creates another problem entirely, one that has landed Zara in courtrooms more than once. If you can take a sketch to a finished garment in 2 weeks, you can also take someone else's sketch to a finished garment in 2 weeks. And that's exactly the accusation that has followed the company for years. Independent designers have repeatedly claimed, sometimes with lawsuits attached, that Zara's design teams closely studied their work and produced near-identical pieces at a fraction of the price, often arriving in stores before the original designer's own collection had even finished its first run. One widely reported case involved a small Los Angeles-based designer whose handmade, hand-painted jacket design appeared, according to her claims, on Zara racks within months, mass-produced, machine-made, selling for a tiny fraction of her price. Inditex has consistently denied deliberately copying any individual designer. And legally, exact copying is genuinely difficult to prove, because clothing silhouettes themselves usually can't be copyrighted. Only specific prints, patterns, and logos can. But the pattern of accusations is old and consistent enough that for years an entire blog existed with the sole purpose of placing runway photos from luxury fashion weeks side by side with Zara products that appeared just weeks or months later, image after image, stitch for stitch. Whether you call it inspiration, trend following, or outright copying depends entirely on who you ask. But here's the uncomfortable part. This controversy actually proves the entire thesis of this episode rather than contradicting it. The very same 2-week production cycle that makes Zara feel impossibly fast and exciting to shop in is the identical mechanism that lets it absorb a luxury runway trend and have it hanging in a regular shopping mall before most consumers have even finished scrolling past the original designer's Instagram post. Speed isn't just the marketing strategy here. It's also, quite literally, the business model's legal gray zone. Now for the part that absolutely never makes it onto the glossy website. In the Atacama Desert in Chile, there is a section of land that, from satellite images, looks almost like some strange new geological formation, like a mountain range that shouldn't exist. Get closer, and you realize what you're actually looking at. Mountains of unsold and discarded clothing, much of it never even worn, much of it still carrying original tags, dumped there because it's often financially cheaper for fast fashion supply chains to discard garments in that desert region than to ship them back home or properly recycle them. Some estimates suggest tens of thousands of tons of clothing arrive in that exact patch of desert every single year. Locals in the nearby town have reportedly described being able to see the pile from space and pieces of synthetic fabric which can take literally hundreds of years to break down, occasionally catch fire on their own in the extreme desert heat, sending toxic smoke over nearby communities. This is the direct, physical, visible cost of an entire system built around relentless speed. When you manufacture small batches constantly and abandon anything that doesn't sell within days, you generate enormous, almost unimaginable volumes of waste, clothing barely touched by human hands, ending up buried or burned in deserts and landfills across South America and parts of Africa. To be fair, Zara's parent company, a corporation called Inditex, has publicly committed to sustainability targets, using more recycled fibers, aiming to cut water usage, and investing real money into textile recycling technology, including in-store collection bins where customers can drop off old clothing for reuse. Some of this is genuine, serious engineering investment. But critics and environmental researchers have also repeatedly accused the broader fast fashion industry, Zara included, of greenwashing, making sustainability claims that sound impressive in a glossy press release without fundamentally changing a business model whose entire engine still runs on overproduction and rapid, deliberate disposal. You simply cannot out-recycle a system that was designed, from the ground up, to make you throw things away faster than you ever did before. There's one more piece of this story worth pausing on, and I'll be honest, it's the one most of these breakdowns skip entirely because it explains why this whole machine keeps running smoothly no matter what happens at the top. The people physically sewing these garments, often in factories across Spain, Portugal, Morocco, and Turkey, work under enormous time pressure because the entire 2-week promise made to customers depends on them. Labor rights organizations have, over the years, raised concerns about working conditions and wages in parts of this supply chain, even in the European factories that Zara likes to highlight as more ethical than competitors using factories in South Asia. It's a useful reminder that produced closer to home isn't automatically the same thing as produced without pressure. Every single one of those 2,000 garments arriving on that truck in London at 10 in the morning passed through someone's hands, under a deadline, somewhere recently, and most of us never think about that part for even a second while we're holding a hanger. So let's bring this all the way back to that nondescript truck on Regent Street. Next time you walk into a Zara, take a second and actually look at the price tag. The number printed on it isn't really the true price of the product. It's almost irrelevant in the bigger picture. What you're actually buying, what the entire system, the warehouses, the cargo planes, the trucks that are never ever allowed to return empty, what all of it is precisely engineered to sell you is a ticket. A ticket into a world that changes faster than any single human being could ever fully keep up with. In the 20th century, people bought clothes to stay warm, to look presentable, to last for years. In the 21st century, fast fashion sells something entirely different: the temporary relief of newness, the brief 15-minute high of holding something nobody else around you has yet, because by next month it will already be gone, replaced, forgotten, quietly sitting in a desert in Chile. Amancio Ortega never gave interviews. He never needed to. The truck pulling up behind that store every 48 hours was always the only message he ever needed to send. And every single time we walk back through those doors, on average 17 times a year, we're the ones answering it. So here's the real question this whole autopsy leaves you with, the one I promised you at the very start. Are you choosing to walk through those doors, or has something far more careful already chosen for you?